So the first sort of hint of suggestion of going forward is to try to redefine what it is we're trying to solve and try to inject elements that are going to go to the core of the issue. Elements of recognition of Jewish legitimacy not just of Jewish attachment to the land, but of a state that they would call their own and in which they would feel that they would be exercising their right to self-determination. Some form of justice and acknowledgement of what happened to the refugees and not simply saying, well, they were victims of a war and now we're going to resettle them in different countries and give them some money and that would be the end of that. So is there a way to inject these issues so that rather than the authoritic process I spoke about earlier, you're putting new elements in it so that both sides can have a win they didn't have before? New ideas, but also new constituencies. The peace process so far has been built around the people who are most likely to endorse it. And the people who have been excluded, those who have been most likely and who have proven themselves most willing to torpedo it. So you have Islamists and refugees, the diaspora on the Palestinian side, who've never really been part of the equation. Even though they're more motivated, they have a greater incentive and greater ability to wreck the process if they want to. But they've not been part of it. Their issues have not been addressed. They've not been addressed as people. And on the Israeli side, settlers and the religious community have been more integrated, but still their issues have not been as front and center at the table. Issues such as recognition of Jewish attachment to the land, recognition of a Jewish homeland, what kind of security they would need, what would happen to the settlers, are there solutions for the settlers other than their evacuation? So is there a different way to define who's at the table? And then finally, is there a different way to think of the international architecture? As I said earlier, what we've been doing so far has been relying either on the U.S. or on the Quartet. And the Quartet, Russia, the United Nations, the United States, and the European Union, has been a least common denominator organization that, again, I think has done its best, not wittingly, but unwittingly has done its best to perpetuate the status quo, has silenced voices that might, in fact, have more creative ideas, all for the sake of being at the table. I mean, I think the Europeans and the Russians were so ecstatic at the notion that finally they were invited to the party, they didn't really care what the party was about to begin with. And if we continue with this kind of model, this kind of architecture, it's very unlikely that we're going to get anywhere. I don't have an answer to what international architecture that could be. I don't have an answer to how you change one of the major obstacles to movement, which has been, as I said earlier, the lack of incentive on the Israeli side. And this is not a matter of being a bad faith. If any one of us were in Netanyahu's shoes, you'd think, what is in it for me to take the political risk that it will be entailed by going to a two-state solution, doing whatever I have to do to alienate some parts of my constituency, when the status quo is not that bad to begin with. The economy is flourishing, security-wise things aren't that bad. Yes, we had some hiccups with the international community, but as we saw, Netanyahu managed to deal with his relationship with President Obama and the U.S. quite well. Is there a way to change that structure by giving greater incentives? I mentioned, can we redefine what a two-state solution could look like? Are there other incentives in terms of security so that Israel is not simply feeling that it's reaching a deal with the Palestinians? What kind of security, regional security architecture could we think about? And are there things that Palestinians could do? Some things that they could do to sort of shake things up, whether it has to do with nonviolent popular resistance, whether it has to do with unification, because I can't imagine the Palestinians are ever going to achieve their goals if they're divided. I don't know in the history of national liberation movements, of the national liberation movement that's crossed the finish line when it was as deeply divided as this one. Usually they either unite or one side crushes the other. But divided this way, they're not going to get where they want. And I think that's something that the international community needs to understand, that Palestinian unity is not an obstacle, but a precondition for moving forward. So are there different ways of thinking? Also rethinking the PA, the Palestinian Authority's role, its functions. What does it do? I mean, for many Palestinians are saying now, we're simply an arm of the occupation. We're doing for Israel what Israel as an occupying power should do for itself. Again, we're perpetuating, we're one of these other elements that is contributing to this addiction to the peace process. Can it be rethought? Dismantling it could be very costly for those many Palestinians who rely on it for their survival. But are there other ways of redefining what it would do? So as I say, these are just, at this point, ideas, but I think it's better, given where we are, given 18 years of consistent, repeated, systematic failure, isn't it better to think of these new ideas, however illusory some may turn out to be.